As the box office collapses, yet actors still want more money, they finally realised what they've got to do to earn it.
I take responsibility.
As DC would have made more money if they just cancelled their movies.
I take responsibility.
And Indiana Jones loses hundreds of millions of dollars.
I take responsibility.
As actors attack and slur the fans, or simply go out and engage in complete hypocrisy.
I take responsibility for every unchecked moment.
For every time it was easier to ignore than to call it out for what it was.
After Ezra Miller,
the Mad Goose Wizard,
has released his latest film, the actors finally have something to say.
Every time I explained away brutality or turned a blind eye.
Ezra Miller pleads guilty and gets probation after home invasion.
And sleeping in your own home should not be a death sentence. I will not turn a blind eye.
After Hollywood has systematically attacked entire cultures, eradicated people's history from existence.
These are our brothers and sisters, our friends. Enough is enough.
To where entire streaming platforms are getting sued on behalf of countries because of the sheer hatred of their nation on display.
I will no longer allow racist, hurtful words to be uttered in my presence.
Only for the actors to come out and not care because they consider themselves above reproach.
I stand against hate.
I stand against hate.
I stand against hate.
As they blamed entire fan bases for speaking out against their own repulsive behaviour.
Every time I remained silent.
Every blatant injustice, no matter how big or small.
Coining new terminology of fan baiting.
Every not so funny joke.
I'm an American! I'm an American!
Every unfair stereotype.
Elf workers taking your trades. Workers who don't sleep, don't tire, don't age.
While calling their customers patently evil.
I will stand against hate in love. I will make my presence known.
As they insult and attack their customer base, only to turn around and expect them to be so sympathetic when they want more money. And why?
Really wish that we could get it to you guys, but we need to stand on the right side of history.
Because their pay packet is on the right side of history.
We can turn the tide. It is time to take responsibility. Step up.
As they stand in the example of Tom Cruise compared to the poor, transparent imitation that Harrison Ford released.
They're snakes.
The actors were really only left with one response.
I take responsibility.
Responsibility.
Of course, none of that actually happened. There was more storytelling and dramatization involved in the first 2 minutes of this video than an entire episode of Secret Invasion. But it's what should have happened. If they want to make Hollywood profitable, it's what should happen. Now, you may be thinking, that's unfair. They're just individuals. They weren't involved in those stories. But they're the ones on strike, demanding collective bargaining, collective value, which means that you have collective responsibility, collective accountability for your industry. And if you want your wages pegged to the other actors while demanding that they be increased, then you're also responsible for their behaviour. When one decides to attack the customer base, you all attack the customer base. Because I could make an argument that an individual might deserve more money as an actor. For instance, Tom Cruise not only makes good movies, but he's the only person commenting who seems to be reasonable when it comes to the strike in the first place. He's like, okay, maybe the actors have some legitimate concerns over AI and stunt performers. But at the same time, those actors should go out and promote the movies they've already made simply to save the movie theaters. Because if you don't save them now, there won't be any left when you want your bigger pay packets to mean something. You can't get paid more when you're refusing to fulfill the contracts you've already signed and gotten paid for. But even though there may be reasonable people as individuals within the union, the moment you tie yourself to everybody else, you drag yourself down to the lowest person in that group and say, I'm just like they are. You peg your wages to the laziest, lowest talent person in there and decide to act like a charity to subsidize them with your money, and then for some reason wonder why you're not getting paid what you deserve. I could make an argument to defend you as an individual, but I can't defend you when you've decided to voluntarily subsidize the people destroying the industry.
I will beat both of you off at the same time.
With writing like that, if you get paid more than She-Hulk's $400, you shouldn't be on strike, you should be going to church because that's a bleeding miracle. And I can't help but thinking that the whole idea of a union and going to your boss to ask for a pay rise has made you forget the real person you're beholden to. The customer base, the fans. That's why you're so comfortable as actors to come out and attack them and call them every name under the sun. To insult them and call them toxic at will.
The Star Wars fanbase really seems to be the most toxic.
Because you don't see your wages tied to those people. To an actor, your wages are simply tied to collective bargaining. You go and whine at your boss for a bit every few years, and then you just get paid some more money. It's not tied to the success of the movie. In fact, it's come out that one of the things which have created the negotiations, according to sources on both sides, one of the biggest sticking point is their demand for 2% of revenue generated by streaming shows. Not profit, not based off views, revenue. I mean, you can talk about creative accounting, but if that's your problem, that's what you should be striking against. Not asking for revenue on top of all those minimums you get for actually doing the work in the first place, which are astronomical, by the way. You actually want to take a cut off the top, regardless of if what you produce is actually profitable. And which means you can come out and insult people and attack them and call them all the slurs in your marketing you want to make yourself feel superior, knowing that you still get paid even if you kill your own production, even if you refuse to work, refuse to promote it, because after all, you're just on the right side of history.
Really wish that we could get it to you guys, but we need to stand on the right side of history.
And I've done a video on Parrot Analytics being well tied into Hollywood, alongside how all of their metrics are nonsense because they take things like, oh, you're discussing it on social media, which would include people trashing the show, as well as saying good things about it. In fact, if people are trashing it, it often appears higher in their ratings. Just look at Velma for proof of that one. The worse the show is, the more laughed at it is, and the higher in demand it becomes. Well, on top of the actors wanting 2% of revenue, the way they would determine the revenue is by use of Parrot Analytics to determine how much each show is worth to each platform so they can get their cut of that number. And because Parrot Analytics would factor in people trashing a show as an increase in their value, this would encourage audience baiting in order to increase their own revenue share, despite the fact that you're scaring off customers and they're not worth any actual money. It's essentially a shell game you're creating to screw money out of your boss while absolutely not caring about the customer at all. And I'm the person who's supposed to be supporting you, am I? I'm supposed to be on your side when you're walking up and down the streets. It amazes me how you can come up with schemes like this rather than just putting out a good show, if you're even capable of it at this point.
Constantly looking to increase my ability as a storyteller. What kind of skills can I improve to entertain the audience? It's all about how do I engage the audience.
We'll see you down there! Whoa!
Even this article says Parrot Analytics uses Google searches, social media mentions, and other data sources to measure demand for each show. It's not even trying to determine viewership, rather the impact of each show on a company's revenue, which it doesn't do at all because people trashing a show doesn't increase your revenue. You're not really making it easy to support you. There's so many things you could have said, like in the first 2 minutes of this video, to really get your customers on side, the people you need supporting you. If you hadn't separated mentally your money coming from your boss as a union rather than actual customers, should we do something where the actors only get minimum wage until the show actually becomes profitable and then you take a bigger cut of the success? I wonder how you'd treat the customers then. Instead, no, we've got Sean Gunn talking about equity, redistribution, how CEOs are making more money than ever before. And look, I agree with you, Bob Iger is definitely not worth that amount of money. But what somebody else is getting paid has no relation to what you do. You are an individual who's worth a certain amount of money individually. If you would like a pay increase, stop tying yourself to somebody else's worth. If you decide to peg your wages to the lowest talented person in Hollywood, then that's the wage you're gonna get. Of course, you're not gonna be satisfied with it. Although they're not even going with an argument like that it's really unfair. No, they've decided to catastrophize everything. That unless we actually get this contract renewed, the acting profession will no longer exist for future generations. This short-term contract is so important and we are so disposable that unless we nail it down now, actors won't exist in a few years. To which I can only say, if your job is so easily replaced, why would we pay you more in the first place? You've got to give the customers a reason to want you to stay in employment. Because if you're getting replaced by something that can do the job better than you. And with the current way you treat the audience, I don't really have much reason to care if you're around in a few years. That goes for some of the media reporting as well. by the way. The ones that think that cinemas don't take any money at all and just set up cinemas out of the goodness of their own heart to give all of their money to Hollywood, which actually is something the actors probably think they deserve. And of course, this is Hollywood with writers and actors. Turns out it's all smoke and mirrors anyway. SAG-AFTRA expands quick photo op strike events to Orlando, Atlanta, and Honolulu. The members will rally outside the entrance of Disney Resort this afternoon for a quick photo op. We're gonna do a strike support rally and photo ops at other places. We turn up, we march around for a bit, record a video, and leave. And when you hear how much work they expect to do in a year, you'll understand why standing around for a few hours is just far too much to do without getting paid $8,000. I also find it interesting that picket signs and strike support t-shirts will be provided at each location while supplies last. The people walking up and down don't even buy their own t-shirts. Did they write their own signs, or did you just give them one with a pre-made slogan on it for them to charge around with? Is that why some of them didn't know what was written on it? Although if they were centrally written, I would have hoped you'd be a bit more creative than this. In case anyone's wondering, that's a good thing, because it means the writers don't put it in all of their work when nobody wants to see it. And bearing in mind the catastrophizing, the exaggeration, and that the strikes themselves are quick photo ops in a lot of cases, but there is a problem when you're asking for higher wages simply because there isn't the work for you to do. When I first started, I could make a living because we had 22 episodes of television. Now there's smaller rooms, shorter rooms, and mini rooms. We only do 6 episodes of television for streaming. We don't need as many writers, and that means I'm not getting as much work as before. I should get paid more money. Why should you get paid more money for doing less work? It's perfectly acceptable to get paid part-time money for part-time hours. Every single normal working person understands this. I don't know why they think they're a special case. Should we just listen to the enthusiasm they have at their photo op, by the way?
Union power! Union power!
I'm almost blown over by the strength of their conviction. This guy's too busy watching an episode of Alice in Borderland on his phone as he's walking around, because he certainly isn't watching anything from Hollywood. And if you really want an expose on their wages, well, have I got a treat for you. Because the stories come out that over 85% of us don't make what we need to get insurance. Now, there are 160,000 members in SAG-AFTRA, so 85% of them is a lot of people. However, they've also admitted that they're actually not doing much work. There isn't enough work to go around over that many people. So instead of some people either doing part-time or going and doing something else, we're going to start claiming that we can't feed our children with these pennies. Should we listen to an actor telling us what these pennies are? Because courtesy of Star Trek Picard, we know that.
Anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000 or 8,000 an episode.
5,000 to 8,000 an episode. Oh, we can't make enough money to survive as we get paid $8,000 for an episode of television. And she's not talking about the big stars. Honestly, mate, I have no idea how you can survive on these pennies. And the best thing is, she realizes that that's a lot of money, because she very quickly backtracks and tries to explain herself.
Maybe that sounds great.
It does sound great, actually. It sounds incredible, and I think you've just realized it.
Say I cobble together 2 or 3 guest stars a year.
And that's her excuse. I'm getting paid $8,000, but I only get 3 episodes of television a year, and that's not enough to get health insurance. Of course it isn't. You're working part-time, but you've got an incredibly well-paid part-time job. Most people working part-time would love to do a couple of episodes of television a year and get paid $16,000 for it. And then in their off time, they can do something else. If you're doing a part-time job, you're only going to get part-time wages. But your solution is to make the entertainment industry grind to a halt and then demand you get paid full-time wages for part-time work. And you think that Hollywood is being the unreasonable ones in this scenario, do you? But no, maybe that's not convinced you. Because I'm not saying that actors aren't needed in Hollywood. I think Netflix is showing us that right now. As they can't get actors, they've decided to move into reality television by making a docu-series about Women's World Cup soccer. It is the US team, so I will continue to call it soccer. But I can't be the only person that sees the obvious flaw in their plan of this reality television. Netflix has gone from making shows that nobody sees to making a documentary series about a sport that nobody watches. Even when they make reality television, they can somehow manage to fail. Pretty impressive, actually. But no, what I mean by drawing the curtain back is the same thing we did for the writer's strike. This time, it's the actors' rates in 2023. For short-term, low-budget projects, with a budget under 50 grand, they still get paid $216 a day, which, considering they have a max budget of 50 grand, is actually pretty significant. But this is the lowest end of the scale, and so we can skip past it. Performers in one episode of television, that's almost $1,100 a day, or $3,700 a week. That is if you just say a few lines. If you're in a major role, such as a guest star, which is what she was talking about from Star Trek, well, that's $6,000 for half-an-hour program, or $9,500 for 1-hour programs. Per episode. Are you still sympathetic to them asking for more money, by the way? I would say that having a main job while doing this on a side would be incredible. And if you're a series regular, then you get special rates. Did any of that sound like someone struggling off pennies? And look, I may have been more sympathetic if you hadn't spent years attacking the fans and insulting your own audience.
Just sickened me to my stomach. You're no Star Wars fan in my mind.
Because you think you're beholden to your masters in Hollywood rather than the people who have the money that you need. But given the treatment that fans have been subjected to recently, let's just be blunt about it all, shall we? The new proposed contracts from the Actors Guild will be costing each company between $450 million to $600 million a year. That's on top of all the hundreds of millions of dollars lost on every movie, because the actors do things like home invasions.
It's me, the Mad Goose Wizard.
Or come out and call fans toxic.
The most toxic.
Or scum who aren't actually Star Wars fans.
In my mind.
And all of this could have been fixed by the actors. There are some actors speaking out. Like I said, Tom Cruise seemed fair in some of his comments before. Hayley Atwell's come out and gone, when I was in Multiverse of Madness, that was a bit stupid, wasn't it? When she says, I could do this all day, and then gets cut in half by a frisbee, that's just bad writing and bad filmmaking. Maybe you should have said this at the time when you were filming it, so it couldn't have been done. Maybe that was the time to strike on set, when they're actively destroying your character. Maybe if Harrison Ford had come out and decided to strike because you're destroying Indiana Jones, he could have saved the movie. Maybe if Samuel L. Jackson had spoken about Nick Fury being destroyed in Secret Invasion, then that show could have been fixed. Instead, he went on tour and started spewing the same thing in his interviews. It's surprising that you think that this is a successful marketing strategy. It really is. Is the marketing department ever going to go on strike? Because if they do, I would suggest that you don't have them back. And on top of that, you get all of the nonsense language. Oh, it's working conditions. Firstly, who defines fair? If you think $1,000 a day isn't fair, then you're completely deluding yourself. You might need to stop acting because you seem to be living in a fantasy world of your own creation as it is. Which is why something like this will never happen from Mark Ruffalo. Why don't we just all jump to indies so we can set up actual competition? And it's obvious, because you're driven by money. You don't really want competition enough to take a hit to your income. You could quite easily do your major movies and then do pro bono indies on the side to build that competing economy. I guarantee you there would be plenty of people willing to take that on if you did want to help set up that competition. But you haven't bothered so far. You haven't even attempted so far. And it's very difficult to believe you're not just doing this to try and get some false leverage against Hollywood as it is. Why? Because you see them as the ones who will give you the money. You see it as a battle between you versus the executives. Rather, how can we convince the fans to come to our movies? How can we please them, entertain them, so that Hollywood makes more money and therefore would be willing to give us more in return because we're providing more value.
Constantly looking to increase my ability as a storyteller. What kind of skills can I improve to entertain the audience? It's all about how do I engage the audience.
We see you down there! Whoa!
You're willing to do everything except respect the people who have the money that you desire. It's just nonsensical discourse about my casting. It's the casting which is nonsensical. We even have writers who said that they wanted to create the anti-Barbie, but couldn't manage to do it in a way that was faithful to the doll's image. And you're like, of course it isn't. You wanted to do anti the doll's image while staying faithful to it. I don't even know why you'd think you could attempt to do that unless you'd had some kind of breakdown. And what you really should have done on the strike is to plead your case to the customer. You should have got them on side. You should have been bending your knee to them for years because they are the ones who give you a job. They are the ones who keep you in business. And yet you still had to get Tom Cruise to come out and tell you to actually do your job and promote the movies that you've already made just to keep the theaters alive because you don't even care about them. The only people you care about is yourselves because you think you're in the right side of history.
Stand on the right side of history.
Just sickened me to my stomach.
And to you, the customer doesn't matter, as long as you can convince your bosses to give you another paycheck. Let's nail them down in the contract, boys. Then it doesn't matter whether we win or lose, because we'll take our cut of the sinking ship anyway. Because that's essentially what this is. The actors and the writers are on a ship, drilling holes in the bottom, trying to take all the treasure that's on board, and then wondering why the water is rising around their noses. There is a problem with Hollywood, the people in it, and their complete self-obsession to the point where they're destroying their own industry and wondering why they're not getting paid more money, because they will run that thing into the ground just to get a few more pennies, as long as it means that they don't have to pander to the fans, the customers, the ones who could keep them in a job. I'd actually love to know what they think of Tom Cruise doing it. Do they admire him for it, or do they think, oh, I don't know why you're lowering yourself to their level, associating with the plebs? Because I kind of think it's the latter, when there is one surefire way for Hollywood actors and Hollywood writers to get more money, make a great product, pander to that audience, and give the people what they want. Well, those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video if you like the video, subscribe for more videos like this in the future, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.